Well, ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump is going for the kill shot on China and their reliance on the U.S. consumer base. This is certainly being tested. You've got Donald Trump vowing to increase tariffs on China to 50% tomorrow if they fail to withdraw their retaliatory tariffs. So, Trump originally had I believe it was a 20% tariff on China, and then a 34% was added when the global tariffs were announced. So that brought it up to a 54%. Now he's talking about increasing it another 50% if the Chinese do not withdraw their tariffs that they put on in response to the global tariff announcement. Because China had their, what were they saying? 34%. China had announced they were putting a 34% tariff on U.S. goods in response to what Trump said. So Trump is really testing this, just the idea that China has just an over-reliance on the United States in terms of them selling us things. And, I mean, he's really going after them. And it seems like right now there definitely is a difference in terms of how he's treating China versus some of the rest of these countries involved with tariffs. He is meeting with Netanyahu today, the Israeli prime minister, and apparently they were going to do a public press conference. That got nixed. Now everything is behind closed doors. I think for Trump and for the administration, it would probably be best to not come to an agreement with Israel first for obvious reasons, but there might be a thing that happens to where there's some negotiation with Israel with Netanyahu here, and the United States agrees to remove their 17% tariff they have on Israel because Israel removed all of their tariffs they had on U.S. goods. But when it comes to this, it just seems like Trump is really, and it does make sense when it comes to the over-reliance we have on China. It is a little bit more complicated in terms of which items that are produced in China in terms of, I mean, a lot of this is just mass production through slave labor and just cheaper material. And that's how they're able to undercut our markets. But some of it is also China's a massive, massive country. They've got a ton of manufacturing, and they're able to produce things because of how big their country is and the sheer volume and population that they have. They're able to produce things cheaper. So the point of it is to weed the United States off of reliance on China. Now, it's a little bit different because they're global tariffs. Now, but he is treating China different, but it would be one thing if you strategically tariffed China to death. But instead it's global, but he's really hitting China hard. And I think a lot of this is he's going to be treating China differently than the rest of the world because of how much of their product infests U.S. markets. We do have a pretty crazy, Trump said it was like a $1 trillion, $1.2 trillion trade deficit. I've seen like 300 billion, 500 billion. I mean, it's a lot. And it's not surprising based off of what they produce and how much their mass production, but it's still something to where a lot of this stuff can be made in the United States. They just undercut our markets. This is not like, oh, we need to get lumber from Canada, because you could argue that Canada has higher quality wood than most of the United States, especially the lower 48. We know Alaska has some really good quality lumber. But the point of it is, Trump is hammering home the idea of the United States having over-reliance on China, China undercutting our markets through, quote, free trade, which isn't really free because every country has their own labor laws, and you can produce things for cheaper in other countries dependent on those laws. Another big thing about this Truth Social post that Trump had, you can see towards the bottom of it, well, Trump says an additional tariffs on China of 50% will go into effect on April 9th. That's if they don't remove their 34% increase. And now apparently China's coming out saying that Trump is bullying them, which honestly is a very weak thing when you think about another country saying that, especially China talking about the United States. Additionally, all talks with China concerning their requested meetings with us will be terminated. Negotiations with other countries which have also requested meetings will begin taking place immediately. Trump is saying there's going to be negotiations with countries possibly removing these tariffs. And so again, the question it just depends in terms of Trump. Which sectors do you pick out? Is it the auto sector? Is it the tariffs with China? Is it potentially other things to where you think, well, we need this production to happen in the United States, and then with some of these other things that we trade with countries, to where maybe there's not, like the EU, where there's not this crazy deficit. There still is a deficit with the EU, but it's not out of control. There's potential for negotiation there regarding tariffs, regarding VATs, regarding manipulation, regarding overregulation on U.S. goods. That's where the negotiations start. And the administration can say, and this is kind of where it all ties back in, you can go really, really hard on China, but if you start negotiating with all these other countries, you can swing, number one, the negotiations as a win. They become a win when you do a renegotiation with Canada, Mexico, who both have said, we're ready to renegotiate, we want to do this. And they've capitulated. They say, we can't take this, we have to. You want to do the renegotiation of the trade deal a year early, we'll do it. And inevitably, the United States, because of our leverage, is going to get a much better deal than we previously had when it comes to the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was put in place in 2020 under Trump originally. And you see this every now and then with Trump, to where you go back to the first administration and you're seeing him do things differently, just like the nuclear deal with Iran, him ripping that up, and now, well, they want a nuclear deal again, and hopefully, we'll see what happens with that situation. That's another video, but you see some differing, some divergence off of the Trump first administration where he wants to go in his second term here. But when it comes to this, I mean, the point of it is you get these negotiations with these countries. Number one, that's going to alleviate the pain in the stock market. And when people say, well, we don't care, and I know a lot of young people out there are saying, we want the stock market to go down, we hate what's going on with the housing market, things like that. Like, oh, it's only the top 10% have 80% of the wealth in the stock market and everything. I get it, I understand it. But really the problem is the stock market it's basically the effect and the barometer of the current economic situation in the United States. So if you see it crashing, that's not going to be seen as a good sign for the administration. Now, I've explained it and tried to talk to people about how this has to happen, and it's obviously going to, like, Trump doesn't put all these tariffs on these countries and think to himself, boy, the stocks are really going to go up tomorrow. He knows they're going to go down. Now, you don't know the exact percentage. Is it going to fall 4%, 6%, 8%? You don't know that. And there are people saying that, well, it seems like the Trump administration potentially leaked a false rumor about Trump pausing tariffs on every country outside of China to alleviate some of the pain, because we immediately saw it was blood red, and now some stocks were rebounding after the rumor of that. So maybe that did alleviate some of the issues. I mean, because they knew it was going to be a bad Monday, and it seems like the stocks aren't necessarily as down as much as people thought, and it might be because of that fake rumor. So a little clever thing you do there to alleviate some of the short-term pain. But the point of it is Trump knew there was going to be short-term pain. That you don't put these tariffs on all these countries and be this wishy-washy if there's not going to be. There was always going to be that problem, but it's clear that Trump is treating, at least right now, China, and I don't know if this has to do with TikTok, I don't think so, but Trump is clearly, it's like Trump tariffs China at a 20% rate, adds another 34%, adds another 50, adds the 34%, and then China hits back with a reciprocal of 34%, then Trump hits them and says, you know what, if you give us a reciprocal of 34%, we're going to hit you with a 50% on top of that. And so, it's very obvious that Trump is putting a high emphasis on China in specific because of how ridiculous the deficit is with China relative to all these other countries. We are going to have crazy deficits with smaller countries just because of how wealthy our consumer base is, and other countries obviously do not have the economy that we have. So if we've got a higher population than them, obviously, I mean, that's why it's so crazy with China, to where they've got a much bigger population than us, but we still have a crazy deficit. So, and that's due to a number of reasons. A lot of people in China are not wealthy at all. But when you look at this situation, it is very clear that Trump is being really hard on the Chinese for obvious reasons when it comes to the deficit. Can the deficit be completely eliminated? Is it really worth it? I think it's worth targeting sectors to where you can get production back to the United States with minimal price increases. I mean, there's no way we're going to be able to gauge this completely. Again, this is economics. There's going to be trade-offs. You might deal with some initial price increases when you're talking about things being made in the USA. There's a reason when you look at something, it always says made in China. It's just cheaper to produce there for companies. And this is capitalism, so you're going to produce it. You're going to outsource it. It is what it is. We're trying to nip at least some of that in the butt without totally destabilizing the economy. And they say, well, he's already destabilized it. Well, no, this is just a force down, and I'm not even talking about and by the way, there's other factors at play, which I mentioned in previous videos a while ago. I haven't been talking about it as much, but the refinancing, I've been seeing in places, I think Fox News said it, and there were some other people that were tweeting it. They're saying, well, no, it's actually $9 trillion in debt that has to be refinanced in 2026. I read it was around 6.2 trillion. Either way, it's a lot of money that's going to have to be refinanced, and you would love to do that. And especially with where we're on par right now, you'd love to do that at a much lower interest rate when you're talking about refinancing that debt. That's another thing that Trump has to focus on. And I'm guessing they've looked at that and they've said, well, let's try and get these interest rates down ASAP, and not just one cut, 2, 3, 4, 5 cuts within the next 7 or 8 months. Hopefully with every meeting there's a cut or around there, especially if they declare this a recession or whatever. I mean, obviously if it is, there's immediately going to be negativity associated with that, and with Trump basically causing it through the tariffs. You'll get Trump people who will argue, well, it was inevitable anyways, the economy was weak. Yes, I mean, the reality is there were some economic factors where Trump took over that were not strong, and you'd be fighting for 2 years, 3 years to really get things in the right direction. When you're talking about low inflation, low interest rates, you could do it a lot faster if you have a recession, or if, it's a short-term issue in terms of the economy. So, whether Trump did that or not, it does seem like they really wanted the interest rates to come down ASAP, and this is a way to force them down. These mass tariffs and hitting China really hard, and we'll see what happens in terms of China in specific. I think a lot of these tariffs, like they did in 2017, 2018, they're going to remain on. They're going to remain on against the Chinese, and I'm sure some other tariffs will probably remain on as well, but Trump is saying right here, negotiations with other countries, which have also requested meetings, will begin taking place immediately. So there are going to be negotiations with these countries. Now, will they be able to agree? We don't know. But a lot of these countries have said, we're ready to do an elimination on all of our tariffs against U.S. goods. So will we see maybe Trump say, all right, we're going to lower our tariffs against you guys if you eliminate ours? So instead of it's 15% tariff against you, now it's a 7% if you eliminate. Is it something like that? Is it 0 for 0? The EU said they want 0 for 0. Obviously, the EU is being disingenuous because they have other ways to tax our goods, and that's part of the negotiations. It's not just the tariffs, it's also the other things that are used to tax U.S. goods. So, we'll see what happens with all of this. But it's clear that Trump is really hammering China because of the crazy deficit we have with them. And, you can definitely classify this. They say, well, it's not strategic. Trump is just tariffing all these countries. Well, this is strategic. He is strategically targeting China, and he's negotiating with other countries. And I'm guessing he's also negotiating with China because he's talked about it, possibly lowering their tariffs if they would give up TikTok or something. I mean, I don't know what that is, but it's something like that. Either way, guys, that's just the current situation. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.